Hello, everybody. It's so nice to have you and to be able to communicate with you at this stage of the development of our consortium. And it's a great opportunity to assess the challenges that we are facing. But just before that, let me introduce myself. My name is Sorin Cazacu. I'm the Vice Dean for International Relations at the Faculty of Letters, University of Craiova. I'm a specialist in ethnic studies in African American literature, and I also work as a translator and an active translator and interpreter. And I've participated in many international meetings and a lot of mobilities and a lot of collaborations that involved communicating between different categories of people, between different nationalities. So I really appreciate the fact that we can communicate today and we can learn from each other, we can hear what each of us have to say. But before getting to discuss the topic, let me just give you a brief introduction of our speakers today. And I will start with the ladies, of course. We have Sanita Martena from Rezekne Academy of Technologies in Latvia. Just a few things about her research interests that include language and educational policies, multilingualism in the Baltics, linguistic landscapes, Latgalian and folk linguistics. Thank you, Sanita, for attending this meeting. Next, we will have Professor Romi Pena from University of Lleida. She's an expert in life sciences. And she's a Deputy Director for International Relations in the School of Agri-Food and Forestry, Science and Engineering. Her expertise is in applying genomic techniques, transcriptomics, to the study of complex traits in livestock species. Thank you, Romi, for attending as well. Then we will have Luca Gardini from University of Udine. He's the chair of History of International Relations at University in Italy. He's also has got a lot of awards, and he has previously taught at the University of Cambridge and at University of Bath in the UK. He has been a practitioner of international and EU affairs as well, and he's been the representative to the EU of the Italian Confederation of Industry and International Trade Advisor to Eurochambers. So thank you, Gianluca, for being with us. And last but not least, we have Professor Svilen Kunev from University of Ruse, who is an expert in entrepreneurship. And he works in business administration and entrepreneurship department at University of Ruse. He's been teaching courses for undergraduate and graduate students in business administration, entrepreneurship, and industrial management. So yeah, these are our speakers today. Again, thank you and welcome. If you'd like to say a few words, or you can just jump to discussing the challenges that we are facing today. So please, you have the floor. Sanita, what do you think? Would you like to start?
Thank you. I can start. I was not prepared, but I can try, and colleagues will add, I'm sure. Until now, I think cooperation among universities have been quite successful in Europe in general, I can say. But what is missing, I think it often is quite superficial, and we have to deepen it. My first impression is to deepen means, if I look through my field, to do something together in research. For instance, take some concepts, like here is very important concept, translocality or identity, multiple identity, and prepare some methodology, research methodology, and try in different contexts to use the same methodology into research our data and discuss data. We are on one line about the same topic, the same methodology, and such fruitful, deeper discussion with different contexts in Europe can give us some unpredictable, some results which we can't predict even what we could get. So not just compare and tell what we are doing individually in a very autonomic way, but just some common topics, common methods, and with comparison would show us global and local tendencies. We would understand maybe better this concept, the globalization, global world, which influence us, for instance, Ukraine war. And if we do research on, I don't know, for instance, international discourses about it, what the media say about it in different contexts, use the same methodology into research, and we would understand each other better if we have something common, either topics, either methodology. But if we just tell in which projects we have taken part before and just exchanging ideas, but we don't have common ground something, it is more difficult. This is my first impressions. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, thank you very much. So common ground is the key here, right? And it makes a lot of sense that we can put our resources together. That's what we are trying to do in order to improve and in order to grow. Thank you. Thank you. Right. Romi, would you like to add something at this point, please?
Yes, actually, I agree with Sanita that at the research level, we interact very well with other universities. And I don't mean the University of Lleida, I mean generally as professors and lecturers, there's a good understanding between universities and it's easy to establish collaborations. One of the reasons for that is that English is a lingua franca, is some media of communication that works very well at research level. So that means that our students at the doctorate level also can collaborate very well between universities. But when we lower to undergraduate, I think one of the barriers that we have in education is still our different languages, which we must preserve, of course, but it's a bit difficult to implement programs that can be or can really facilitate mobility in a very fast and ample way. I think one of the limitations we have in general in Europe is the diversity of languages that we have, and that's a limitation in education as well. At another level, I must say that, and that's different from Sanita, our methodologies are usually quite stable across universities. We have common challenges, common topics. For instance, nowadays the UE has moved to this neutral emission system, or this neutral emission challenge in the near future, and that means all our research and our education as well, our training moves toward giving these tools to our students so that they can understand and they can face this challenge. And especially what I would like to stress is that in general, EU gives you a general legislation which each country adapts in its own way. And that means that when you're working with professionals across borders, sometimes we don't deal with the same challenge in the same way, because our legislation means that the way that we dispose of animal waste is not the same way as another country nearby does it, just because we have different ways of applying general directives, general challenges. Okay, and I think that's also important for our students, because we need to let them know that knowledge is something that is very dynamic, that needs to be a long life training. It's something that they are going to be doing all their life. They need to adapt to new legislation and new ways of facing these challenges. And I suppose that happens in other fields as well.
Yeah. Those are very good points, excellent ideas. Yeah, right. So it's, on one hand, it's the language that unites us, and we still have some challenges to overpass, such as formal constrictions, methodologies, different legislation. But with communication, we can sort that out. So thank you so much, Romi. Yes. Gianluca, would you like to add something to this point, please?
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Sorin. A pleasure to join the panel. my expertise is actually in regional integration and foreign policy analysis. So I would like to start from my own area and my own expertise. I've been thinking through the two key points of this meeting, that is how we identify and tackle cross-border cooperation challenges. And the second point is, what can universities contribute to address these challenges? And I think that the two issues really go hand in hand, because in fact, who identifies and who can tackle practically, concretely, cross-border problems? These are policymakers. And collaboration across borders is in a way foreign policy, just at a different level. Because when we talk about cross-border cooperation, we generally talk about cooperation between municipalities, regions, universities. In general, we talk about subnational actors. So we move from the field of state-to-state diplomacy to what the literature calls para-diplomacy. That is, diplomatic activities carried out by sub-state level actors. So in this respect, I think we can take one step back and look at how these actors interact with one another. And in this respect, I would be happy to expand later or to put forward for discussion on the table a discussion on how we understand, design, and implement our cooperation across borders. And here I come to the second point, that is, what can universities do, and especially a network of universities such as ours? And here, what can we do? We can establish an effective partnership with policy makers. And I think this is a key point, because an effective partnership is a consistent partnership. It's not just an assessment, a consultancy, but it is a continuous dialogue. But a dialogue implies a two-way discussion. So I think that what universities can do, especially in our case, we put together several expertise, and we should establish a permanent dialogue with policymakers in our respective areas to understand what policymakers need from us and what we can contribute for them to actually implement our ideas and tackle the challenges that we all want to address. I think that would be my perspective and what I could contribute to this discussion.
Excellent point. And you're getting things to a different level. So it's excellent. It's amazing that we have different expertise. So we can contribute in many ways. Thank you so much, Gianluca. Now it's Svilen's turn to say a few words in the continuation of this discussion. Svilen.
Yes, thank you, Sorin, and thank you so much for inviting me for this discussion today. I'm very pleased to meet you only by screen now, and I hope really person by face-to-face in real time. For me, it's also very important how can we deal with the cross-border challenges, because the uniqueness of our partnerships among universities is that we are not only cross-border between two partners, but we are dealing with cross-border challenges among a consortium of partnering institutions like us, universities, which makes us to meet and to try to answer to different obstacles or barriers in front of our cross-border cooperation. If I have to analyze a bit some eventual or potential some cross-border problems, we can have them like in two groups. For example, internal issues for the institutions, for the universities, that could be solved in the same institution, and external issues that are mainly outside of our universities, that are the real barriers in front of our cooperation. For example, like Romi said before, some legislative issues are very often problems for us. I have some examples with the issuing of joint diplomas with the students because of the different state requirements of the states of the two universities that like, or two or three universities that like to have the joint diploma, and it makes us sometimes difficult to have the administrative process for that. Also, if we talk about the policymakers that Gianluca mentioned, this is also a question of the quality and the capability of state support for our cross-border cooperations. Sometimes it's not such a big, let's say, focus for the state policies to support such kind of cooperations, which makes it a little bit more difficult for us to overcome the obstacles. And if we talk about some barriers that arise and come from our internal environment of the universities, for example, these can be focused on the programs design. How can we have our joint programs that could fit to the institutional levels of our institutions inside the consortium? It's a question of design of the program, the content, the quality standards that we have to meet. And if we have to design or to meet equal quality standards among the countries in the consortium, also the admissions criteria for the students, the recognition criteria afterwards, and stuff like that. Also, it's an interesting question when we talk about cross-border challenges is the way of teaching in some universities. For example, there are some specific traditions or pedagogical approaches in the universities that could be a little bit different from the other universities, and it needs to be adapted also. And if you talk about the culture as an external factor, I have to, maybe if you allow me to give you one interesting example from the field of entrepreneurship, with which I have met in some of my projects also in the country or in the international projects, is the question of perceptions and attitudes towards success or failure of the entrepreneurship. The person who starts the business or is running the operations, which makes students sometimes to think more deeply or to prevent themselves not to choose some programs that are focused on entrepreneurship because they have some let's say, some fears if you're becoming an entrepreneur, what the society would say or think if you are not successful entrepreneur, which is also a question of cultural heritage or cultural attitudes, which should also be fitted into the joint activities. I think that we have a lot of obstacles that we can describe or we can focus, but I think the benefit of our cooperation and the most important feature of the European universities approach is that combining our capacities, we can have some very fruitful joint decisions of those obstacles, and that could be, let's say, a benefit also and a tangible result from the cooperation, besides the educational and scientific part from our work. Thank you.
Right. Thank you so much, Svilen. And yeah, it shows once again the necessity of such discussions and such approaches and collaborations, because we are all looking at the same problems, we are all having similar situations, issues to tackle, and we come up sometimes with different or with common solutions. Now, I would like to launch another idea to you, and if you want to, you can refer to it or can contribute with any other ideas. I was thinking of a quote which helped me in my research on ethnic studies, and it's from Heidegger, who said that it's a boundary. He refers to boundaries, and we are dealing with this idea a lot. He says that the boundary is not that at which something stops, but that at which something begins its presencing. So in a way, it's just the idea of the way in which we modify each other. We are not actually keeping our position all the time. We negotiate all the time. So I think that's one of the reasons for which such ideas will work, because we need to see where we communicate, where we don't communicate enough, where we can negotiate our positions, and from that we can grow together. So what do you think? Is that correct about boundaries? They are not physical, they are not cultural, they are not economic boundaries, they're just the bridge that connects the two parts. What do you think? Yes, Svilen, please.
I just remembered when we started with the pandemic situation 2 years ago, I had a talk with some of our colleagues in university, and our rector had a good example that the Chinese symbol from the Chinese alphabet for success and for a problem is one and the same. It's the same symbol. So it's a question of viewpoint if you have it like an opportunity or like a problem. So the successful partnerships maybe, or the successful strategies to look at the problems like for the opportunities for future success.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, it's how you see it. Thank you, Svilen. Now you have Sanita raising her hands. Please, Sanita.
Yeah, thank you for this great question. I would add mental boundaries. We can look from different perspectives, but we have mental boundaries which is grounded in our cultures, identities, past, present, etc. And I think this project could also help to bridge, to create, to understand each other, which boundaries do we have, and concentrate more on common, actually what we have in common, because it's enough currently what we hear, how different perceptions, how different media create different identities. But I think every European project, particularly I feel it here in Latvia, it's southeast of Latvia. This is external European Union border, which is very close to Russia and Belarus. And I would like with such projects, such cooperation, strengthen more European identity, what we have in common, democratical values and such mental bond, which we have something inside, but they stay in individual level, in cultural level, but we see what is common values among different countries crossing boundaries. This would be from humanity's point of view to stress more aspects, common aspects for European Union.
Great. Thank you, Sanita. That's an excellent point. Now we have Gianluca raising his hand, please.
Thank you. Yes, I agree with what colleagues have just said, and I would say 2 or 3 things to add to the discussion. The first is that boundaries do exist, and we cannot ignore them. So we cannot pretend that boundaries are not there. And I quite like your idea, Sorin, that you can use boundaries as a connection. You know, we have a typical example in Europe across history, the Mediterranean Sea. It could be seen as an obstacle or as a channel of communication across culture, for businesses, for ideas. So this is important to turn challenges into opportunities. But what we need to do that is creativity. We have to be imaginative. In fact, if you remember ethnic and political studies about nations, nations are imagined communities. So we can imagine communities across borders, be these borders geographic, physical, mental, cultural, lingual, but there is a way to go beyond. And where there is a will, there is a way. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. Right. Makes sense. Romi, what would you think?
Yes, I agree that we have in general, we have these borders, and then having common challenges is actually a good way of bringing these bridges, or to building these bridges and bringing us together. And talking about challenges, something that I feel very, very strong about, and it's something that is probably quite common across Europe, is the depopulation of rural areas. That is something related to my topic. We consider now that rural areas are actually a place for innovation, because you need to bring education there, you need to bring technology, you need to bring communication, and you need to keep the systems, the production systems also working. So I like to see the repopulation of rural areas as a bridge to bring us together and to do some innovation where we, I think, can contribute. And I would like to ask something to Gianluca when you were talking about having an open dialogue with policymakers. I always wonder who are policymakers? How do you contact them? Because they are like they are a body that is difficult to reach. And I love that idea, but I wouldn't know where to start.
Shall I?
Yes, please, Gianluca. Yes.
Well, this is an excellent question. One of the problems about forging a consistent and effective relationship between policymakers and academics is that the relationship must, and I stressed must, go two ways. So it's not healthy that it's just scholars trying to reach policymakers. We also need to create the circumstances and the context for policymakers to reach academia. And we must be a little proactive. There are channels, and especially if we're able to join forces and to pool resources, we can create channels and we can create dialogues, starting with, for instance, contacting municipalities and see which kind of concejal, regional minister, and so on and so forth deal with our own area, and ask them what they would need from us. Not tell them what we could provide, but ask them what they need. And if we cannot provide that, surely the Across program as a whole can have something to offer. I think that would be the first step. So to turn the question around and ask policymakers what they need and see if we can meet their needs.
Great. Thank you so much for clarifying that. And now, because we are reaching the limit of our time, I would just suggest we finish in a lighter tone. Let's think about one of the advantages that we have living in these cross-border areas. And I will just start real quick and say that I feel myself privileged because I can have breakfast in Romania, lunch in Serbia, and then I can have dinner in Bulgaria, right? Does that make sense to you? What do you think? Let's just finish with a round of discussion and then finish this. Right, so Sanita, what do you think? Another advantage of your border location?
Yeah, some advertisement. I liked your idea, Sorin. I did research in the cross-border area between Latvia and Estonia. I was sitting in Burger King, eating a lot of burgers during day because I used method observation. I was observing which language people use to understand each other. Estonians in Latvians, I tried to understand correlation with age, language choice, and linguistic behavior. And so eating, and I'm saying students, it's great to have research, sit in some burger cafe and do observations in cross-border area. So let's do it together, but maybe not burgers. Romi reminded us we should think more in green.
Okay. Romi, would you like to add something, please?
Well, I live close, or used to live very close to France, so I have some French turning in my Catalan language. That's quite natural there. And then I also love going to Perpignan for French cookies. That's something that we used to do with my dad.
Sounds good. All right. Gianluca, anything from your side?
Yes, I mean, you're talking to an Italian about food and wine. I mean, that's an open door to me. Apart from that, I really think the great advantage of living in a cross-border area is diversity and exchange. You learn a lot, you can profit a lot from the experiences of others and also the richness of others. You know, it's great. We live really 20 minutes from Slovenia and less than an hour from Austria here in Italy. And I can not only have breakfast, dinner, and lunch in 3 different countries, but there is the 3 border area where I can put 1 foot in Austria, 1 foot in Slovenia, and my hands in Italy. So, you know, that's just a way of thinking and how to enjoy. My word is, let's enjoy this proximity.
Excellent. Thank you. And Svilen, what would you say?
Yes, thank you. I also join to those opinions, and that could add that the benefit for us being a cross-border area, because as Sorin said, in our region it's very easy to go to one or another country, given the fact that our university, our city is just on the Danube River, on the one of the side of the river, and on the other side is the Romanian city, and we have only one bridge that connects us. The benefit here is that it's easier to build joint infrastructures. For example, scientific infrastructure or joint activities that can be run on a daily basis with the students or with some events connected with our activities. So there are a lot of advantages, and I think that cross-border cooperation can be one of the driving force for building a common, let's say, not only national, but European competitiveness, because we can exchange our uniqueness and to build a new European uniqueness at the same time. Thank you.
Great. I think that was an amazing talk, and we generated a lot of good ideas that need to be continued and developed. So once again, because we are almost approaching our time limit, thank you so much for attending. Thank you for your amazing and especially positive ideas regarding our collaboration. I would like to thank our organizers for giving us the opportunity to meet each other, and hope to see you real soon in presence. So yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.